Take it away, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to the meetup. And so I was contacted to maybe do a mobile accessibility talk, and I offered up this one at What's in Your Toolbox. So it's mostly mobile web. It's not any native mobile, but all about accessibility testing for responsive and desktop and mobile web. So anything HTML, and I'll talk about ways to trigger like the mobile views in a desktop browser so you can then test it with your accessibility testing tools or with the screen reader. So we will learn about how to use different automated and manual accessibility testing tools. I have demos of browser extensions, JavaScript bookmarklets, using the web inspector, developer tools, accessibility testing frameworks and libraries, and more. And we'll show accessibility testing techniques, cheat sheets, and checklists as well. The agenda is to go over some accessibility testing browser extensions. So depending on what your favorite browser is, which extensions are available in that browser. JavaScript bookmarklets that work in all browsers, and they also work on mobile phones and tablets, Android and iOS. And you can install bookmarklets anywhere. And then Web Inspector developer tools, which will help you inspect code either on mobile pages or desktop, or to trigger responsive views or user agent switching. And talk about accessibility testing frameworks and libraries, testing techniques, and cheat sheets and checklists. So for the accessibility testing browser extensions, the ones that are available for Chrome that I have listed here are Axe, the accessibility developer tools. That is from Google, and then Wave. So let me show you Axe. So the way you would install these is that you'd first have to visit this link inside Chrome. So if you copy the link and then go to Chrome, and y'all should, inside the YouTube live stream, there's a link to this presentation, so you can view it right now and click on all these links. So you will be able to get to all these extensions if you just open them in the browser that you need to install them in. So if you go to Chrome and then paste in the extension link, then we'll see Axe, and it is already added to Chrome. So the way you would do Axe is if you go to a page like Google, then you can right click and hit inspect. And then once you have installed Axe, you'll see another tab in your developer tools where there's console networking. It's all the way at the end, and it says Axe. And then you can hit analyze, and it's going to give you whatever automated errors Axe can find. So it says that the page doesn't have a main landmark on Google's homepage, and they have some issues with contrast. So the other thing Axe does is you can hit highlight to try to look for where the contrast is, but it's on an invisible node, like an already hidden, so we're not actually seeing it. But then if there's 5 issues inside an Axe result, then you have to hit the next arrows to go through each issue. And it'll highlight it there. It's saying that doesn't have good contrast. It's gray on gray, so it's probably not that good. Another thing you sometimes have to do is manually test for contrast. So I have the color contrast analyzer to do that. I should have that linked in this slideshow as well. But if you are ever worried an automated tool doesn't have accurate color contrast results, you can test it yourself manually to double check. And yeah, it's 4.2 contrast ratio. So unless that's large text, which is sometimes hard to tell, then it's not sufficient for WCAG's requirements. That's pretty close. So that's Axe. And then Google's accessibility developer tools, They have actually switched that into something called Lighthouse, but that actually uses Axe too. So I don't use this one as much anymore. But you can still install it. It's added to Chrome. Some other things that it does is give you more power when you're inspecting code to look at the contrast results in the web inspector. Let's see, go to Google. If I inspect one of these buttons, oops, actually I clicked it. So inspect the button, and then since I have this extension installed in Chrome, I now have an accessibility properties panel or an accessibility panel, and I can see information here. This isn't showing me the contrast. It might be because it's an input, not actual real text. Like if I try it on this text at the bottom, I'm still not seeing contrast, but usually you'd be able to see contrast here, and maybe I'm not in the right Chrome. I'm also in Canary. So if you are using Chrome, these extensions can work in regular Chrome or Chrome Canary. Canary is just their latest like beta version of Chrome. And then Wave is another big one. So if you're on a page you want to test with Wave, I've got it installed in Chrome and it puts a little Wave icon. And I can just click that Wave icon and it'll output the errors on the page that you're in. So this is Google's homepage and this is the Wave results. It found a missing form label. Another thing with Wave, if you can't see all your errors, it says there's 5 errors, but I'm only seeing one. You probably need to click no styles, and that will get rid of all the styles, and then you'll be able to see more of the errors, like an empty link. There's a missing form label, another missing form label. So that is something the automated tools can do, and then Wave doing a contrast test. Well, I'm not seeing exactly where the contrast failure is. But you have to click contrast to see the contrast issues inside Wave. It's not going to show them to you automatically unless you hit contrast. All right, and then in Firefox, you have Axe and Wave as well. You just get a little bit different of a user interface with Axe, and then Wave is pretty much the same in both Firefox and Chrome. So though that's the 2 places that you can use Wave and Axe as an extension. Chrome and Firefox are pretty much the most popular browsers for extensions, and Chrome is now the most popular browser with developers. Firefox kind of used to be and had a lot more extensions and everything, but Chrome has pretty much one now. And on the Safari side, there's not really many choices at all, or there's no accessibility extensions at all until I made one called Alley Tools. So that one, I have a screenshot here where it's a collection of my JavaScript bookmarklets that are in an extension so that I can run them on sometimes more secure sites and also just have faster access to them because I have this on the right-click menu. And then I also bundled in other tools like Axe is built in to the console output. And Totally is another tool I like a lot. It's a bookmarklet HTML code sniffer I use all the time as well. And Wave, if you right click on the page, you can just send that page to Wave and also send it to the validator. The validator will find ARIA errors and other HTML accessibility errors. Other things that Alley Tools does, besides just testing, is I have some things that I use a lot. The ARIA specification docs. So I just, when I want to get to something that I need real fast, I just right click and I go to the ARIA authoring practices so I can get like the pattern that you need to build accessible tabs and quickly get to an accessible tabs demo. and then I can give that to developers. So I can say, this is how you need to code your tabs because they're not accessible currently. So since I visit these pages so often, I just built that into the extension as well. Other pages I visit a lot also are my demos, because I give these demos out to people a lot when I put in accessibility issues. And then also the resources for any accessibility demos that I didn't make from other people's sites. So things like video, I've got them grouped. So just look for the section for video, wherever I put that. And then I can quickly get to all the accessible video examples that I give the folks, like for audio descriptions and captions. So it's sort of like my bookmarks of all the accessibility resources that I use a lot. So Ally Tools has the right click, and things that it can do. It's based on the bookmarklet, so it does everything the bookmarklets do. And so this is a data table here. If you want to run the data tables tool, you right click and hit data tables, and it then just runs that bookmarklet for you. So the bookmarklets that I have are single step testing tools where you do one test at a time. It doesn't run all the tests together, like this is the headings. And if I want to do landmarks, I have to just keep adding them onto the page. And I can either reset the page to get rid of them all, or just refresh the page and that'll get rid of all the errors. But these are used for screenshots as well. When I'm doing accessibility testing, you can display an error. If it doesn't have any alt, that just looks good in the report to point out the problem. So that is Ally Tools. And for Internet Explorer, there's a web accessibility toolbar, and it has bookmarklets built into it as well. This is a screenshot of the web accessibility toolbar for IE. And so you see things like headings, bookmarklets, and ARIA landmarks. It also has a color contrast analyzer that I showed built into it, and various other accessibility testing tools. So I recommend that one if you're using Internet Explorer. So for JavaScript bookmarklets, basically what they do is insert code onto your page using JavaScript. And the ones that I have basically are showing you the accessibility code or attributes or properties that of what you're trying to analyze. So if you do headings, it's going to show you the heading tags and the levels. It's just a way to save you time from having to inspect the code. And if you're on a mobile phone, you can't always inspect the code. So this is a fast way to do testing. And you don't have to turn on screen reader. So that's another thing you could do with headings, is just turn on your screen reader. Then this is Code Sniffer. It inserts its whole user interface. Code Sniffer and Totality, this is Totality over here, the headings one. They both create a user interface to hide or show their accessibility errors. Code Sniffer runs all its issues or all its rules at once, and then gives you a report with could be hundreds of issues depending, because Code Sniffer has a lot of sort of false positives or a lot of noise. And so let me show you Code Sniffer. And these all work on mobile phones as well, or from your iPad or your Android tablet. The way you install a bookmarklet is you just drag the link up into your bookmarks bar, and then you drop it. You do have to make sure that you view and show your bookmarks bar. Otherwise, you won't be able to drag them into it. But once it's up, then you just click on that bookmarklet, and it inserts the user interface for that tool into the page. And it says there's 0 errors and 25 warnings. But like, let's say if we go to google.com, you could run Code Sniffer on the page and see how it outputs the errors. for Google's homepage. So it's 5 errors, 12 warnings. Now, I usually always turn the warnings off just because most pages have a lot of noise. Could be 100 warnings there. And I never really look at notices, but there's good information here. If you should just read it through, like once you fix all the errors, then you probably want to go through and read all the warnings and notices just to make sure you didn't forget anything. So you can hit view report, and it's saying there's a text area that has no accessible name, although it is a display none, so it's not actually available to the screen reader, but automated tools are going to find that. And then this is a same code sniffer will give you sort of like 2 errors for the same thing that's inaccessible. You'll get 2 different failures. Text area, missing name, and also it's missing a label, even though it could be fixed by using a single label. Then this element has a roll of button, but has no accessible name. Oh, what? And it's just got a title. So they really should use an RA label for that. Another thing I'll do with these bookmarklets is take a screenshot here and also copy the code, especially if they just give it to you right there. You can just copy the whole issue into your accessibility report, and then it saves you a lot of time. And they have the links to the relevant WCAG requirement and a technique to fix the problem. Some of these, is not, I don't know if this is really an accessibility failure when you see they use the center tag, the tag center, which is like an old tag that's now obsolete in HTML5, but it has no effect on the screen reader though. So this is something as an expert, you'd have to tell folks, this isn't a critical problem. And that's the difference you'll see with Code Sniffer, like versus Axe, which Axe wouldn't give you any of these sort of failures. They're trying to avoid the false positives. But Code Sniffer is really nice in all the things it does give, but it can be too much information. Okay, and then, so my bookmarklets, they are all installed. If you go to my webpage, pauljanum.com, and then go to bookmarklets, the installation is the same as Code Sniffer. You just have to this is the demo pages on this column, and then these are the install links. If you click those links, it will run the code. But to install them, you have to drag them up into your bookmarks bar and then drop them, and then they'll be installed. So once you do that, if you go to a page, like a forms page, then you run the bookmarklet, it's going to run that code and output either good or bad accessibility errors. So I try to do things like red and say some of the errors like no ID match on the label. If there's ARIA described by, I try to output all the ARIA attributes, HTML accessibility attributes, and this is done to help make accessibility testing easier and just find problems faster without you having to use a screen reader or look at the code. And then Totally. So Totally, let me go to the page so you can see. Made by Khan Academy. And their install link. Okay, it's right here. This is their install link. So you just drag that up and then you can run it. It's going to put a little icon at the bottom. So if we go to Google and run Totally, then you'll see you can look for headings. No, it's not really finding any headings. Contrast, it's saying that this text up here has bad contrast, this sign-in text. It said 1.0, which I think, it's seeing white on white. It's not seeing the blue background. So the automated tools can often get contrast issues wrong. There might be an image behind this, and they can't tell what that blue color is. Better test for Totally would be like on one of my bookmarklets page on the forums. If I run Totally, it'll show all the errors on the labels. Like all these inputs are missing labels. Another thing Totality does really good is the headings and heading level nesting errors. So when I run headings, it's going to tell me there's a non-consecutive heading level used. We skip from an H2 to an H4, and then you can see where exactly those levels jumped because you get like a document outline, and then you could put a screenshot of that into your accessibility report, or just copy it and paste in the errors too. So then online testing tools, Wave is also available online. So if you had even a tablet, you could visit wave.webaim.org and run it without installing anything. So if you ran it on Google, it'll do it just like the normal Wave, but I'm in Safari now. This is how I run Wave in my extension. So you can right click and hit Wave page. It just uses their online Wave. And then you'll see all your issues and everything there. Then the validator is another one that is good as well. You can either type in an address or just paste in code. If you ever want to validate some code manually, just paste it in. Let me see if it'll do anything for Google. The issue with the validators, these are not all accessibility errors. Most of them are not accessibility errors. So you have to know how to read it. So you just have to look through and see. I mean, this is the error that CodeSniffer found, that the center tag is obsolete, but that's not really necessarily an accessibility barrier. The validator may not actually find any on this. So, but if you ran it on something like the forms page, which I know has errors in the forms, then it would probably give you some accessibility related errors. So here's one. So the error, the for attribute of the label element must refer to a non-hidden form control. So what it found was a label that's referring to something that does not exist. So that's an accessibility failure that the validator did find for us. So it finds orphan labels. That may not cause a barrier, but usually is an indication of accessibility problems or just lack of good coding. These are ARIA references that have their IDs don't actually exist on the page. So most all automated tools will find these, like Axe find these. It looks to see if your ARIA described by references, if the IDs actually exist. So I have one that says non-existent ID. It's not actually on the page. And then Web Inspector developer tools, like the Chrome Accessibility Developer Tools and Safari. So with Chrome, I don't know if I was in the wrong Chrome, maybe why it wouldn't show me the colors there. Let me try this Chrome. The actual regular Chrome. I was using Canary earlier. So, because I wanted to see if I could inspect and see the contrast. Yeah, so I see contrast. The other thing with Chrome is that you can toggle to switch to a mobile view. And then didn't refresh the page. So I switched to iPhone 7 after I click the toggle device toolbar, switch to iPhone 7. Now I'm in the mobile view because Google is not responsive. That's another thing. So Google doesn't actually change when you resize the browser. It's not a responsive site. It's got a desktop version and a mobile version. So most responsive sites will switch as you make them bigger. So to get to the mobile version, you have to switch the user agent, and then you can run your automated testing tools on that. Now, If I wanted to test color contrast now, I could inspect this code and look at the contrast ratio. 3.5. I don't think that's sufficient. So, and I could run Axe on the mobile version now of Google. And yeah, it's the all. So what I suspected is blue, light blue all text. That's too big. Well, here we go. It had insufficient contrast. That's still too big. Okay, so it's showing the code here. Axe showing the source code, all insufficient contrast. The other thing, a lot of the accessibility tools will give you a learn more link. And that will kind of explain the problem to developers or how to fix it. So the good tools usually will give you those links. I don't have any learn more links on mine because mine are just kind of hacked together with jQuery. All right, so, but what I wanted to show though, once you're in Axe, you can inspect the node for the failure, and that'll take you directly to the code. And then here we see, this is the accessibility properties, and Chrome, this is normal Chrome, not Canary. It shows you the contrast ratio. So 3.56 is not sufficient, but then it shows you what passes, AA level, 4.5. So if you just click that, it'll preview it in the browser, and then, let me see, there we go. Then you can see what that good contrast looks like. So this is not accessible according to WCAG. This is accessible on level AA, and this is AAA accessible. So you need at least this ratio. Now you can give this to developers and say, this is the hex values you need to use. So I just showed a little bit of the user agent switching in Chrome. Now to do it in Safari, you have to go to develop, then user agent, then iPhone. And now I am in the Google mobile page. And they just had this weird dialogue you could have tested. So, and other things you can do is test for keyboard accessibility on mobile page. That's something that is forgotten most of the time, or a lot of the time. Like, looks like maybe they don't have a focus visible on this. I also have a bookmarklet called Force Focus to show you the focus, and yeah. So Google didn't put a focus outline for this button. That's why I have that focus outline for when that happens. So I don't have to turn the screen reader on to see if I can get focus to it either. But what you'd want to test is the hamburger menu. So open that, enter key, spacebar key, it does not work. So Google homepage is not accessible on the mobile version. It's easy to miss that if you were looking at it on your iPhone with VoiceOver, because you wouldn't know that it's not, you can't tab to it. And when you double tapped on it with your iPhone, it will simulate a click event and it'll just click it like a mouse. So when you tap it on the iPhone, it's actually just clicking it. That's why you wouldn't know that it's not accessible. Now, other things you could test for too, now that we're in the mobile view, we can do screen reader testing, and that way you don't have to pull out your phone necessarily to test it all the time.
VoiceOver on Safari, Google window, Google web content as keyboard focus.
Okay.
Main menu button, visit main menu button.
So this is Google's hamburger menu. It's called main menu button.
Currently on visit main menu button.
But yeah, when I press enter spacebar, nothing happens. When I press spacebar, it scrolls the page because they didn't prevent the default.
This main menu button.
So I can simulate a click with Control Option spacebar and VoiceOver.
Press main menu button.
And then also they didn't handle focus management any. So when this menu opened, the focus didn't go anywhere. So it should have been moved into the menu, just like a modal dialog when it appears. This whole page, the side menu is now modal and the rest of it is grayed out, so it shouldn't be focusable, but it probably is. So actually we're underneath it. I'm just moving screen your focus around.
Google Apps, link, Google,
So like modal dialogues, you'd want to hide the focus of grayed out content.
link, image.
Now I'm just tabbing too. When they start tabbing too, you'd want to kind of trap them inside the hamburger menu.
Link, search, link, image. Day 4 of the Duke voiceover off.
So let me show y'all. I have a demo in a hamburger menu that I had to make a demo because there's so many hamburger menus and none of them are accessible. And to make the demo, I just searched, how to create a hamburger menu. I found one that's not accessible, and then I fixed its problems, which wasn't hard.
Voiceover on visited link. How reading web this navigation menu collapse button.
So this one also has a state collapsed, already expanded equals false, so you know it's collapsed, and then it works with spacebar key.
Close navigation menu button navigation.
And it moves the focus in once you open it, and you're kind of trapped in it. You can't get to the grayed out content, at least. And
close navigation menu button.
When you close it, it'll send your focus back to where you came from.
Navigation menu collapse button main. Voiceover off.
So that is why user agent switching is helpful to test mobile sites right on the desktop. Another thing, like with my iPhone, when I have a site open on my iPhone, or on my desktop, I can quickly go to the iPhone, and it has AirDrop or it's called Handoff, where I'll be able to quickly open that page up on my iPhone and then do testing there. Let me see, so I can get my phone up on the screen real fast. Let's see, so if y'all wanted to see my screen, I can connect it with a cable, do a new movie recording in QuickTime. I have to switch to the iPhone. And also switch to the iPhone audio to get the voiceover output to come out of my computer. If this doesn't work, I'll move on, because it sometimes is weird when you're trying to get your screen to show the iPhone. Beach ball usually means it's either about to work or not work. Other thing I have is reflector, which will let me AirPlay to the screen. No, that might not work because I'm on the phone too, so I'm not going to try that. Okay, I'm just going to move on. Maybe having more trouble because I'm actually on the phone that I'm trying to use at the same time. Okay, I just plugged in a headset, but let me make sure it's actually connecting to the right thing.
All right.
Okay, so default built-in microphone output. Does it sound any better now? Can you still hear me?
A little bit.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, yeah, thanks for letting me know. Otherwise,
Okay.
I have no idea. And let me know if you'll have any questions or anything.
So, we've had a couple of questions that we've had just kind of internally here.
Okay,
One is to get Ally tools,
cool.
which I think is linked to from your.
Yeah, it's on my website, pauljm.com.
Yeah, so I can get them that. Any other? I feel like I'm taking an order, like I'm sitting in a car. I'm like, does anybody want anything? Do you know of any other tools for testing accessibility that don't require you to actually install anything locally on your machine, like if you need to do your testing offline?
Offline, without any internet
totally
access?
allows you to do that, but it's a little lacking in some of what it gives you.
Okay, I think, I mean, sometimes I have situations where if I have a local page that I'm like previewing, I can't run Totally on it when it's on my hard drive. Let me see here. Let me put this up. So if I try to do, no, it's not going to do anything. So I can't run Totally on this because it's a file on my hard drive, but I can run my Bookmarklets, but it's because I have internet access.
Okay. So like if you're developing, you can install Totally into the web page, which is a very useful tool for developing offline. But I was just wondering if you know of any other ones that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
So the Bookmarklet for Totally will run, but it does, well, no. I don't know. I guess it's not coming into my page when I run it. And some sites, if they have a lot of security, like GitHub, it won't run certain bookmarklets because it's security reasons. But then I can right click and then run it. Sometimes I can run them from the extension. Maybe that's still not working. Or maybe I can run my bookmarklet, I guess, because it's running locally from the extension, but then I can't run it from the web bookmarklet version because GitHub has some like extra security. But yeah, I don't know of tools that don't work without the internet access as well. Most of them sort of do need it. I mean, anything where you're downloading JavaScript to your hard drive and then running it, that works as well. That's why it's working here in my extension, because I have it locally. If I put in, the problem with if I put in Totally locally is I would lose whatever updates I do. So all the ones that are kind of run by other people, I usually don't have locally. I do have Axe in locally, so that one would work here too. I have to run it on the console, and then I think it'll work. It takes a little bit. Well, if it's not okay yet, yeah, it's beach ball, and so it's running. Yeah, like a tool like Axe, when it's on a real complex page, it's going to take a while. Most all of the accessibility testing tools will. So be careful. Sometimes you just have to abort it or just wait. Okay, so
Okay.
that ran.
Any other questions so far? Yes, the other people should have audio.
Are you hearing it come out from the live stream?
No, because I muted the live stream just while we
Oh,
were
okay.
asking.
Okay.
So we have it up on the screen, but I just turned the audio off because the delay was weird.
Okay. Yeah. No, it looks like it's still hearing me.
And if you're not in the room, then you don't get to ask questions.
I'm not seeing them. Someone could ask them in the chat. It says there's 7 viewers. Alrighty.
Okay.
So I'll keep going unless y'all have questions or you need me to pause for time. I probably may not be able to get through all this, so just let me know when you need me to stop.
Sure. No, this is good. Yeah. It's until. Yeah. I guess. Does anyone have any specific questions they want to ask? I'm not sure if it's more than time for it just generally. Oh, sure. Okay. Someone might actually be sending in a question.
Okay.
Someone who's in the room. So we are literally playing a game of telephone now.
Well, I'll just keep talking until I get
ahead.
them. So for some other areas for mobile, like if you want to do testing from an app on your phone that you just download the app in the App Store, on the iPhone, there is one called the Mobile Web Accessibility Checker, and you download in the App Store, and it actually uses the Google developer tools and the Axe framework to do testing. And there's a example of the Google site with bad contrast as well. That's sort of what the output looks like. And then another one is made by Google themselves called the Google Accessibility Scanner. It's really made for native Android apps. So if you have an Android phone, you can just download this in the Google Play Store and test any apps on your phone directly without having to use a computer. And it will tell you the accessibility errors and let you email the report, and it'll tell you also color contrast failures, which is nice, automated contrast testing in the native app. And this contrast testing also works on web pages. So if you visited a web page and run Accessibility Scanner on Android, it will do the contrast testing and some other testing as well. So that's different than these other tools that were all run from a desktop. There's some mobile options, native mobile. So, other things that I usually would show would be like accessibility problems you'd find on any sort of popular site, like jet.com is one. So if you ran something like Code Sniffer on jet.com, you'll see a bunch of errors. It says 44 errors, 47 warnings. So I usually turn the warnings off. And then we can go through the report. It is a autocomplete that has no accessible name. Form field label missing, or form field missing a label. There's a search icon that has no text inside it, so it's a link without any text inside it. Same thing, it's their logo, Jet logo link has no text inside it. So the screen reader has nothing to speak, it just has that icon. So you can take a screenshot of that, but sometimes you just click through real fast, see all the issues you want, or kind of get a feel for where they are on the page. Sometimes you're just trying to get a screenshot of a certain one, and you move it in and take a screenshot of that. So Code Sniffer, very nice. You could run Totally. see if they did their heading levels correct. It says no, it's 23 errors. So they jump around, skipping levels and whatnot. Is there a question?
Before you get into totality too far,
Mm-hmm.
got a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Right. Hey, Paul, so I'm relating a question. It seems like people are unable to ask questions through the YouTube channel.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So the question, as I'm reading here, is question about using CSS grid to manipulate source order. The standard example is using a nav element being a second landmark block, but pinning it to the top or the bottom of the screen. The question is, what kind of hindrance, if any, have you seen this create?
Well, you're not supposed to use CSS to visually position things in an order that doesn't match the source code order. So if you have, like people used to do this to sort of put the main content first before the navigation. In the source code order, you had the main content, and then after that would be the navigation. But then visually, they would push the navigation up to the top. I don't really like that technique. It starts to get too complex to manage, or it just doesn't match up with what you're visually looking at. So it's easy to explain to people to make the source code match what you see, but trying to explain positioning things with CSS and all that is pretty hard, and there's already enough like considerations for accessibility. So I don't really recommend those techniques. If it didn't break the reading order, or if you're doing it in a way that didn't affect accessibility at all, then it's fine. But typically what I've seen is when it has broken the reading order. But I don't see that too much anymore, but not necessarily something I recommend. Hope that answers your question. Feel free to contact me if not, or if you have a demo, I can give you a better answer.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. No problem. Thanks.
Any other questions? So far? All right. Carry on, Paul.
Okay. So the way you learn all these testing tools, install the testing tools, go visit popular sites and run them all. And this will help you learn accessibility, how to find problems and fix problems, and compare all the different tools. They all are good at certain things and not so good at certain things. I did write a blog post for about accessibility testing tools a lot. It's on the 24A11Y. 24A11Y. It'll just be 24A11Y.com. Yeah, and there's a post I did, accessibility testing tools for desktop and mobile websites, where I compare some of these tools that I'm talking about and what they're good at and what they're not so good at, pros and cons, and all that. So I suggest you check that out if you want to learn more. So you have your automated testing, running those tools, and then another thing is manual screen reader testing, which we showed, simulating the mobile views and then doing screen reader testing on there, and keyboard only testing. So all your mobile sites you can test for keyboard accessibility without, on an iPhone you can't do that. So you have to use a desktop computer or an Android, because Androids let you tab around. What iPhone does now, but you have to hit Option Tab on your iPhone, and it's not what you normally expect. So it's pretty experimental at this point on the iPhone. And then there's continuous integration. Like if you're doing automated builds, you can run something like Axe to tell you if there's any failures, like each time you do a new build. Other ways of testing for accessibility, simple things that require nothing more than your mouse or your finger, is to click on the label on the form. And if you click on the label, if it's a real label connected, it will focus the input after you click it. But if it doesn't do that, then it's not really connected. And then, you know, if there is no label, well, you don't even have anything to click on, so that's not going to work. But let me show you like my contact form. So all these inputs are connected. I know just because I just click on them. I don't have to even turn the screen reader on to test it. And that's really important for tiny little radio buttons. You don't want to force them to click the tiny box. You want to be able to click the whole label. If you're using an ARIA labeled by method, that's not going to work. So sometimes you may click it and you'll be like, oh, it's missing the label. But if they use ARIA labeled by, then that technique's not going to work. You will lose that click. So that's another reason it's much better to use HTML before you try to use ARIA. Here's color contrast. So I showed the color contrast analyzer, and it lets you do manual testing. You'll have to do that on things like placeholders because they are not always, or most of the time, they're not tested by automated tools. So you have to manually test them. And these tools do contrast testing automatically. Wave, CodeSniffer, Totally, Axe. This is Wave on apple.com homepage. They have bad gray contrast in their footer. So Apple usually never has good contrast necessarily. And then Google also has low contrast. In their search results, the blue is too low. So this is CodeSniffer showing this one, and then this is Wave. Makes for good screenshots. Another thing to mention for accessibility testing is that the results you get depend on the screen reader and the web browser and the operating system combination. If you use the wrong browser with the screen reader, you're going to have problems or bugs, or things may not work. So like on the Mac, if you try to use Firefox with VoiceOver right now, it doesn't really work very well. It's really slow, or maybe doesn't have all the accessibility support. So I've never really recommended Firefox and VoiceOver. So what you should use with VoiceOver is Safari on the Mac and on the iPhone. So Apple makes VoiceOver, Apple makes Safari. They work better together. Now you can use Chrome because there are some bugs that are actually worse on Safari than in Chrome. So Chrome actually does the work pretty good, but there are more bugs, sort of more bugs with Chrome than with Safari. But it's things you have to consider. On the Windows side, it's even more complicated because you have JAWS and IE, really the most popular combination. NVDA and Firefox is the most popular combination for NVDA. But really, NVDA and JAWS works in IE and Chrome and Firefox at all different levels of support. And then there's Edge, which doesn't really have much support yet. And then on the mobile side with Android, it's a little more complicated than the iPhone, where you just use Safari and VoiceOver. That's it. But on Android, you can use Firefox or Chrome with TalkBack, which is the screen reader. So Chrome is the default browser that Google makes and includes, but then Firefox is actually sort of more accessible, or has better accessibility support with ARIA or data tables, or even HTML4 accessibility properties. So there's more to consider there, and more fragmentation with Android in general. VoiceOver on iOS, and I don't know how long the meetup's going. So if I'm supposed to stop at 8, let me know. I have about like 6 slides left. Just y'all let me know if I'm talking too much. Alrighty. What's time check? Keep going.
Yep.
Okay.
Your time check question just came through.
Okay. Cool. Sorry, delay.
Yeah, it's like 4 slides.
Okay, cool. So so VoiceOver on iOS, when you're doing the accessibility testing on the mobile device, you're going to have to learn the gestures for the screen reader, your swipes, finger gestures, 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers, and then the rotor, where you put 2 fingers on the screen and rotate. You can use a keyboard with a mobile device, and the keyboard will make it easier to operate because you don't have to touch the phone, and you can just leave your phone on the desk and then move everything around using the keyboard. So that makes it easier. Then you need to learn the accessibility shortcut where you triple click the home button, or on the new iPhone, you triple click the power button to turn VoiceOver on and off real fast. So that's something that I find very useful. Or you can just tell Siri to turn VoiceOver on or off. So if you ever forget how to turn VoiceOver on or off, just tell Siri, turn VoiceOver on, and that will work. And I do have a cheat sheet for VoiceOver if you wanted to learn what the gesture and keyboard command equivalents are. So to adjust the value in a slider, you have to swipe up or down. If you're on the keyboard, you use the up or down arrow. Then like activating items, to activate something with VoiceOver, you double tap. To select it, you just single tap, and then to activate it, you double tap. And if you want to do that with the keyboard, it's the VO key plus spacebar. And VO key is the control plus the option keys. Anytime you see VO, it's control and option together. So there are a lot of commands for the mobile screen readers, and this is basically a list of it so that you have quick access to it. And if you turn on things like quick navigation keys, you can press like 3 for heading level 3 or B for button. If you don't have a keyboard, the way you navigate to semantic elements is using the rotor. So you would switch to these different elements like headings, images, landmarks, and then you can swipe up and down between the semantic element that you're trying to navigate by. And this is a really important feature that you need to turn on your iPhone. Like if you have an iPhone and you do any accessibility testing, you should have this turned on. And it's really easy to do. You could do it right now. You just go to your iPhone settings and then general and accessibility, and it's all the way at the bottom under accessibility shortcut. And what that does is allows you to set VoiceOver to be turned on quickly when you triple click the home button on and off.
VoiceOver on.
So
720-484.
I have
Selected audio button.
so I just can click, like on my iPhone, I can click the power button 3 times, and that'll turn VoiceOver on and off. And I do this for accessibility testing.
VoiceOver off. VoiceOver on.
And so you can log in
VoiceOver off.
to the app you want to test and then turn VoiceOver on. And when you're switching between screens, you can quickly turn VoiceOver back off so it goes a little faster. On the Android side, the navigation methods are similar. You have Explore by Touch, which is where when you turn VoiceOver on, you are TalkBack on. Anything you touch on the screen, you just slide your finger along the screen and you hear everything. It's sort of like if you hovered your mouse over the screen, you would hear whatever the mouse is on, but instead it's your finger. So whatever you're touching, it speaks out loud, as long as it has accessibility properties. So if this image had an alt text, it would speak it. But if it didn't, you wouldn't hear it. So that's Explore by Touch. And then there's gesture commands like swiping forward and backwards and up and down. And then there's also right angle gestures on TalkBack where you swipe up and to the right or up and to the left. Keyboard commands. Android is actually keyboard operable, the whole entire operating system, where you can tab around using a keyboard without the screen reader. That's an advantage over iOS. It's not actually keyboard operable in iOS like a Mac is or a PC, but Android is the same as a PC basically for keyboard operability. The way you can pause TalkBack, like on VoiceOver, we can triple click to turn VoiceOver on and off. To do that on Android, you can hold the volume key up and down, and that will pause TalkBack and turn TalkBack on. So basically the same as the triple click with VoiceOver, but you have to hold the volume up and down key. So let me see if I can get my Android on the screen, maybe at least. I'm going to try to do it through cast. Yeah. It's not showing. Okay, I can do it through reflector or visor. I haven't wanted to get the phone on the screen. So I have an app called Visor that'll show it. I just got to plug it in through a cable. Oh, now reflector's coming up. Okay. So now y'all can see my Android phone. And then if I hold the volume up and down key, voiceover or talkback will come on. Oops. I didn't hold it down long enough. You kind of have to hold it for a few seconds. So it's not the easiest thing. And that's coming out through my ears. Let me see. Output is through iMac.
Help and feedback. Paul's MacBook Pro connected.
Okay.
Double tap to activate.
So the other nice thing is that if you have a keyboard connected, you can turn talkback on and off from that keyboard by holding the volume up and down key as well. Oop. I didn't mean to do that. Yeah, so here we are back. But another nice thing about talkback is that you can actually see what it's saying.
Talkback on. Paul's MacBook Pro connected. Cast. Alert local show headings. Cancel button. Paul's MacBook Pro connect. Alert contact talkback settings.
The way you do that is in the talkback settings.
Text to speech settings in list 20.
There's something called developer settings all the way at the bottom.
Showing items 20. Developer settings.
And then display speech output.
Speech output on off.
So VoiceOver doesn't have this capability of showing what the screen reader is saying.
Enable node tree debugging off.
At least on the phone, you can't see what VoiceOver is saying, but Android does have that.
Display speech output.
If you enable it.
On. Display speech output on switch.
And now,
double tap to activate.
Now you can take a screenshot and put that in the report if there's any accessibility problems.
Home, over, settings, ESPN. One FL, double U, double tap.
So these are like buttons that have no accessible names.
Double tap to activate. Menu. Oh, home, in, N, out of list.
And this is a settings button that has no accessible name.
Oh, home, in list, 51 items. MLB. Double tap to sports.
So that's one way you can do accessibility testing with TalkBack on the Android phone and actually show the speech output. Now on Android, instead of the rotor, you have the local and global context menus, and that's where you can pull up the settings for the screen reader and switch to navigation by landmarks and headings. If you're on an HTML page, you'd be able to do that. So if you don't see landmarks, so I have here,
headings.
I have headings. It's not showing me landmarks. It must be seeing maybe web content. Usually you wouldn't see links unless you were in a web page.
Links, headings, headings.
I have to collapse this.
Selected scores. Double tap to activate. Audio ducking, verbosity. Speech rate. Verbosity, audio ducking. Audio ducking off. Audio.
The other thing is that on the Android, you can switch things based on the fingerprint scanner on the back. There's a button on the back of the Android phones where you scan your fingerprint and it lets you change screen reader settings.
Speech rate. Navigation.
Navigation is the one I was trying to get to.
Links.
So then you switch between the navigation method you want.
Paragraphs.
Like I could go to headings and then swipe left and right between headings. but there are none, so it's not actually working. I have to visit a web page for that to
Overview
work.
button. Home. Home button. Google Play. Chrome. Progress bar. Chrome. 90.
So
100.
see
Our
here.
educational and explore our educate lines. Alert
So this
local
is a
content,
web
headings
page,
and
so it does
landmarks,
show
and list 8
landmarks.
items. Headings and landmarks. Double headings
And then when I
landmarks.
swipe right or left, it'll just do headings or landmarks.
Learning is learning without limits.
Oh wait, no.
Heading links. Headings and landmark. Learning is our explore region.
Okay,
Looking
yeah.
for Pearson,
It's doing the
looking for
landmarks.
Pearson region. This is digital. This is digital content info region.
So there's the
region.
content information landmark. So make sure you turn on developer settings display speech output if you have an Android phone, and also have a cheat sheet for Android as well that shows you how to do it with the keyboard or do it with the gesture command. And basically, to test for mobile accessibility using a phone, you can get all the WCAG requirements and sort of break them down as how you would do that testing. I have a mobile checklist that does that, like non-text content. Set your screen reader focus to each non-text content element, images, buttons, form controls, iframes. Check that the accessible name's correct. Ways to check for captions, like enable closed caption under settings, play the video, make sure the captions show. So checklists will help you make sure you remember all the WCAG requirements to test for. And this is a screenshot of the rotor here on the iPhone. So to switch to navigate by links, you put 2 fingers on the screen and rotate left with VoiceOver, and then you swipe up or down to cycle through the links. And you do need to add some things to your rotor, like landmarks isn't going to be in the rotor by default. And if you want to add data tables, headings, images, all the semantic HTML elements that you test for accessibility, then you switch to those elements like landmarks or headings, and you swipe up or down to go through them. But your basic testing with the screen reader or keyboard only is to navigate the whole page. You tab, swipe, or arrow key through, set focus to everything, check the state, accessible name, activate all the controls, make sure the roll's right, sliders have the correct values. Check for keyboard focus visibility and keyboard focus order. Don't test for keyboard focus with the screen reader on. You need to turn the screen reader off before you test for focus visibility. And for forms, enter blank data and invalid values into the form and submit it to test for the error validation and see if that's accessible. And I do have the last page in the slides has links to resources and accessibility testing tools that I've gone over. Do you have any questions?
We're just waiting for the.
Do you have any questions?
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Paul.
No problem.
We do have a couple of questions here.
Okay.
Eliana?
Hey, Paul, it's Eliana.
Hi.
Thank you so much for sharing. This has been fascinating. I've got a question about the gestures on Android, and I'm wondering when you've been doing testing with them, how often you find that they don't work properly. Per the check sheet, you try the swiping or the double tapping and nothing happens.
Yeah, I mean, Android is pretty buggy, so I have seen that happen a lot. So I do recommend that people use a keyboard if possible, because that will make things easier.
Brightness.
So I could navigate everything with the keyboard
79.
only. Oops. And that
Chrome.
might help out a little bit.
Pearson, skip to main region.
So right now I'm not touching the
HP
phone. Just using the keyboard to go through everything. It's a little bit faster too.
Okay.
https://
So you just have to know all the, because sometimes, I mean, swiping through, you kind of will lose your focus or it'll start to get buggy. And yeah, I've seen those sorts of problems. More so on Android than iOS. iOS is a little buggy, but it's really solid and stable. So if you're just learning mobile accessibility, I would definitely say learn iOS first. Android, you just kind of have to get used to the bugginess. Do your updates, make sure TalkBack is updated and your Android operating system in the browser, because you have 3 different update versions: the OS, the screen reader, and the browser. So it's a little bit different than on iOS.
Okay. I have a question about, you know how you find often in testing web sites that form fields are missing, labeling's missing, that kind of thing. You've come after a while to expect that there's going to be some problems in that area. Is there anything gesture-wise with Android where the developers are routinely forgetting how to do it, like not putting in alt text? That's not the example I'm thinking of, but in terms of making it so that you can properly gesture through and not skip over elements on the screen.
Well, for native apps, sometimes, like, there's the back button.
Back button.
Sometimes people forget to tie like when you go through a native app and you go into levels of views, you're supposed to make sure the back button will always take you back to the previous screen. That's even more important on Android than on iOS. But and there's a swipe for Android where you swipe down and to the left to go back. So you want to make sure that your native app has tied into that. On iOS, the gestures, you do 2 fingers and draw the letter Z, and that is like the escape key. So if I don't see that coded into the app, usually what that does is supposed to make the back button activate, but frequently they'll forget to do it. Whereas you'll see in the native Apple apps, they have that coded in. It's usually just some custom apps that don't, and so that's something related to what you're asking that I find.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
No problem.
Any other questions? I think we have no other questions on this side. Thank you, Paul.
No problem.
This was good. I learned a lot about TalkBack tonight. I didn't know that you could turn on the developer tools to let you see what TalkBack was actually saying. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Accessibility.
I wish they did that on the iPhone, because I can do it on the Mac.
That would be really nice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people shaking their heads here.
I could show you something like on the iPhone. You have the accessibility inspector, which will let you see certain properties. But it doesn't show you the voiceover output. It will show you, like whatever the accessibility properties are that you select. It just won't show you any of the actual output, what VoiceOver is saying. But you can run an app in the simulator and then see what those properties are. And there are, so I can run something in the simulator real fast to show y'all. And the accessibility inspector, you have to have Xcode on your Mac, but it also will do contrast testing too, with the color contrast. So it's kind of nice. And you can test, if you plug in your iPhone with a cable, you can test other apps that you just download off the internet. But for some reason, my phone's not connecting. It only wants to connect to my iPad. But it will just run in the simulator too. So if you're a developer, native developer, you can do accessibility testing in the simulator without needing to use VoiceOver. So if I target the simulator in the accessibility inspector, then you get a little inspection thing just like your browser tools. And then I can inspect the elements, and it'll show me that this input has no label. And then you can step through, and this other input has no label as well. So that sort of stuff.
So a little kind of like Inspect 32 or like the inspector from TBG that allows you to go through and look at what the OS actually thinks the name role value stuff is.
Yeah, it finds like the heading trait here, but it doesn't tell you, what it says header, but VoiceOver actually says heading when it speaks it out. It's a login heading. So it's a little bit different, but you can just read the accessibility properties, and you can take screenshots of that too. So
And see if it actually has a trait defined.
Yeah.
Or did they just put some big bold text at the top?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a lot. Like, sorry I didn't do enough actual VoiceOver demos like on the phone. There's so much to go over in accessibility and mobile accessibility. So feel free to email me or send me a question on Twitter if y'all ever have any.
What's the best email to use for you? Is that on your?
You can use the contact form on my website if you want to, but I'm also I'm at paul@pauljadam.com. But this contact form will send me an email to that same address. And I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn as well.
Thank you very much, Paul.
No problem. Thank y'all for inviting me. Happy to present to another accessibility meetup. If y'all ever come to Austin, come on to our meetup, or y'all can present at our meetup if anyone's ever in Austin. We haven't figured out how to do much remote stuff yet. I know we've done that before in the meetup, but if y'all ever come in person, that'd be awesome too.
I would say that we're still figuring out the remote meetup.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but better to have tried and slightly failed than to have not tried.
Well, at least my slides are online, so if the meetup totally fails, you've got that you can go through.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. Talk to y'all later. Bye.
All right, bye.